want to say? Okay, at this point, we're going to close the workshop. We will, at some point in the very near future, probably have an ordinance that will need to be advertised, written and advertised for change, or maybe not, if the majority of the board doesn't agree to it, and so just stay tuned for that.
It's going to like that one, yes.
I'm sorry? Do you want to say something, Christy? Christy?
I was just wondering, yes, hi, Cindy, this is Christy Budovich. I'm at 381, or 382, sorry, Jubilee Drive. And just out of curiosity, when people elect to allow or to sell for gas development, isn't that the same as if somebody elects to sell to a developer?
Yes. And that's the point that I was trying to make, is that somebody elected that. I think it's thrown around, and I've been asked as an elected official a number of times why we are forcing housing plans. We don't do that. We don't go out and actively advertise for housing plans. Landowners sell to developers, and then developers come before us. I also think it's a misperception. It was put out there, like, do they come back every year? Quite honestly, they come back more often than that. I don't think for as long as I've been on this board, which is 7 years, any developer has applied for an application for a housing plan that they said they're going to start in 5 years. Almost all of them start immediately as soon as the approval happens. They also come back at every phase. So every time they add a new phase of housing, they have to come back before the board to let us know what's going on. We don't currently require that for oil and gas development. So my point was, you know, it's not, there's no, we're not forcing as a township municipality, as a township, somebody to sell to a developer. Does that make sense?
Well, I understand that nobody's forcing anybody to do anything, but oftentimes the ordinance and the requirements and the requests of the board are a bit different for housing development versus oil and gas development.
Yeah, they're two different industries. So yeah, I think that's fairly obvious.
There's actually more restrictions on the housing plans, and there's more things that have to go through the planning commission, and more things that have to go through.
Right.
Like the driveway, if you sit here and have a conversation for 30 minutes about excess overflow parking, like on multiple meetings, like every township meeting, there's multiple development conversations. So I'm not.
That's a great point, and I want to say that for the record. Kara Shergan brought up the point, you know, when we are considering a housing plan development, there are so many conversations that are had about things as minimal as how many parking spaces should each house have, and how, you know, I'm sorry,
Where the snow goes, or
where does the snow go? And they come back multiple times over years, over periods of years. And while I think they're two completely different industries, I think that it would be unfair to say that oil and gas goes through a more rigorous process than housing developments do.
Than oil and gas.
Right.
Excuse me, but remember one thing, the oil and gas isn't here forever. It's a short time inconvenience for a long-term convenience.
So I'm glad you said that, because that was on my list. I actually think that's a total misconception too. So you're telling me that it's a short time. When we sat here for Connor Samuel and Schultz Bernard, their plan, and you were here, was over a 20 to 30 year period. They intend to drill 4 or so wells at a time. To me, 20 to 30 years is not a short period of time. I will tell you too, Augustine started July of last year. We are still applications 2017, but the actual construction on the pad was July of last year. We are currently still, more than a year later, having effects of oil and gas, road closures because of the pipelines, and those are all things that weren't considered or weren't brought to our attention when you're applying for Augustine. They're saying, okay, we're going to frack for 2 weeks. but it's a year later and we still, over a year later and we still have truck traffic. And we're talking 30 years, so 30 years is not a short time.
I don't think they're going to be drilling for 30 years. They may have the well there for 30 years, and people will be getting royalties for 30 years, but I don't think they're going to be drilling for 30 years. Because listen, there's Troyer Farm, and there's Troyer Farm pad, and there's the Ingle well pad. Nobody even knows about them here in the township.
But do you understand, though, that once they're approved, they can come back at any point in the future? And
That
do
is
whatever
true.
they want there?
That is true. And the same way with some of these housing plans.
That's not true.
It is true. They can go ahead and expand. They can expand these here housing plans, and they can keep on just making them bigger and bigger and bigger. And how long has they been doing up in Windsor Woods? I've seen trucks up there tearing up people's yards because they can't get through because they're building more and more, and they're tearing up the lawns because the trucks are too big to even go in there. So it's a win-win situation for some people, and it's a lose-lose situation for others. However, all I'm saying is the people in Windsor Woods, they messed up. How so? They weren't advised that there was a well pad going in. Did they do their homework?
Oh my God, who asked that?
Okay, so just for point of clarification, you were misspoken when you said that they can just expand whenever they want. That's actually not true. So they come, you know this, they come before the board and they present a plan. Every single phase of that plan, they have to come back before the board and advise us of what's going on. If they want to do additional work, Traditions of America was just here last month because they wanted to expand a small section of their plan. It isn't like that for oil and gas, and you know that, and that's the point. Like, the point is, like, you yourself brought up housing plans and look at what they do, but they are also required to go through land use, which currently we don't require for oil and gas development. So I'm not saying that there isn't a place for it in the township. There is. I'm just saying that we as board members need to be very cautious about where we are approving them and think not only about the pad that's going to go there in the period of time. I'm sorry. Think about the pad and the period of time that it's going to go in, but also all the things that come with it. So the pipelines, the water transfer trucks, the construction, that kind of stuff. It's not just a 1 or 2 week, oh, we're going to frack for 7 days. That's not accurate.
Okay.
Anybody else have anything else they want to add?
Yes, I think Jocelyn has something she wants to say.
Go ahead, Jocelyn.
Hi guys, everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
It's
Okay.
just so you know.
Thanks. Well, good evening. Thanks for hosting this workshop. I know it's been a little bit delayed, given COVID and everything going on, but again, my name is Jocelyn Edwards. I am a local government representative with Range Resources. And I just have a couple comments, and I realized it doesn't seem like the township has anything like a tangible document that they are currently considering, but I did just have a couple comments and wanted to give some input on behalf of Range and just reiterate to the township that we are willing to work with you through a new ordinance should you choose to adopt it, because it does inevitably impact us and those with whom we have leases to rightfully and lawfully develop their mineral estates. So I just had a couple comments. It's no secret we have been operating in Cecil Township for the past several years. As you know, Augustine is underway and the big rig is scheduled to be out there in January. But we have over 7,500 acres of the township leased, and our goal is to responsibly and safely develop the mineral estate of those mineral owners in your township. We recognize that you do have an oil and gas ordinance. It dates back to 2011, and let's face it, a lot in the industry has changed since 2011. So we would be open to discussing how our operations now were different than they were back in 2011. Things we could live with, things we couldn't live with, for the better of everybody. I do recognize that there have been several opinions. I know we discussed this back in February, heard a lot of input back then, and here we are now, continuing to discuss it. But I think one thing that, from Range's perspective, I think that there's a lot more we would agree on than disagree on, and I think several of the things that we would agree on are actually already state law or laws that are impacting us, or there are things that are in your ordinance. For example, your ordinance does address sound. If you would want to revisit the sound provisions of your ordinance, perhaps we could come up with something better. But just from a state setback, there are so many things that preempt the township, things like air monitoring, air permits, things of that nature, some of our erosion and sedimentation and stormwater controls. Those are all things that get preempted. The issuance of well permits, we have to meet a 500-foot minimum setback from a protected structure for a well permit to be issued. If the township wants to impose additional setbacks, that's your prerogative, but our hope would be that those setbacks would not zone us out of the township. I heard the number 2,500. I know it's something that the Attorney General came out with. That's an arbitrary number as stated by the DEP, and a 2,500-foot setback would zone us out of the township. So, those are things we don't want to see happen, and I don't think the board would want to see that happen either. So there's, right now I feel like a lot is being thrown out there, but without a real working document, it's kind of hard to comment on our thoughts on, what regulations could the township impose that may have an impact on us. Can we have a chance to comment on that? So is the plan to put together an ordinance or to look at other ordinances from adjacent or municipalities in the area? I'm not really sure what the township's thoughts are, what the board is entertaining, but if you guys don't mind keeping the industry in the loop when it comes to that, we would appreciate it, and we would appreciate a seat at the table. Like I said, I think there's far more we agree on than probably disagree on, and far more that's out there that's already on the books as law that we would certainly be willing to discuss with you when the time arises.
Cindy, she makes a good point that we have to come up with a new draft ordinance if that's going to be the case, and then we still have to have another public meeting to have them see what we're proposing, because the citizens may want to come again and make comments on some of the additions or maybe deletions that we're making. So we can't have just come up with an ordinance and then vote on it.
No, I said it has to be.
Okay. Yeah, we will.
So, but I think I completely disagree with her when she's asking for a quote seat at the table and that somehow they would get special priority. This is our ordinance to write. We are well aware of state laws and preemptions, and we have a solicitor who has been willing and is able to help walk us through those things. If they want to attend at our public meeting and comment, of course, we'll be open to hear it, but we wouldn't do that, and we don't do that for any other industry, and for, quite honestly, any other company. So I just have a personal hard time giving them a special exception. It will be advertised to the public in the way that it should be, and they're welcome to provide us with any sort of comments they want at that time, but I don't think that I want to get into